In this episode of The Bear Roars, Dan chats with Bob Yates, a prominent figure in the Boulder, Colorado community. Bob has 40 years of experience leading companies, civic organizations, and nonprofits. He is known for his deep commitment to public service and local engagement. With a background in law and business, overlapping with Dan at Level 3 Communications, Bob brings a unique blend of expertise and practicality to his work in the community, balancing the needs of a rapidly growing city with the values of its residents. A former Boulder City Council member, Bob has been a vocal advocate for sustainable growth, environmental preservation, and the economic vitality of the region. This episode is part one of a two-part series with Bob Yates. Let's poke the bear to kick off the conversation.
So, Bob, this one's a little different than some other ones in that we're going to make this a part one and a part two, release both at the same time, because I think some of the listeners are going to be more interested in the part one and others will be more interested in part two. So part one's going to be what got you into kind of the political scene, and then a political discussion in general, focused on local politics and specifically Boulder itself. So I think both will be fascinating discussions. I think the readership will be slightly different. And then the second one going to be how you and I had crossing paths as part of the whole journey of fiber and bandwidth. So we're going to focus that on that part of your career.
Let's do it.
Great. So you shaped your life in a way that is pretty unique. I mean, you decided to lean into the local Boulder political scene and express yourself by trying to make a difference here. So let's start with why. What was it that led you to spend, the next decade and plus here trying to make a difference in Boulder and choosing kind of being part of the political process as the platform to do so?
Well, I think we all have an obligation towards service. I think we all have an obligation to serve each other, whether it's in our immediate community or more broadly.
Do you think everyone feels that obligation, or is that like everyone should have one? Or
I think everyone should have that one, and I think it comes to us at different points in our lives. I mean, when we're younger, right, we're mostly worried about paying the bills, right, paying the mortgage or the rent, and getting our kids through college, and money is a means to an end, and as we grow and mature and hopefully gain in wealth, we can start reflecting a little bit on why we're on the planet and what our obligations are. And I was blessed and fortunate to have made enough money in my law practice, and then in partnership with you at Level 3, to be able to retire when I turned 50, and that had been my goal. And as a matter of fact, before I turned 50, I'd already started to serve the community here in Boulder. So we, of course, we started Level 3 in Omaha in the late 90s. We moved it out here to Broomfield, to Boulder, pretty quickly. I had returned from working for Level 3 in Europe in 2001 and worked at the Broomfield headquarters for 10 years, from 2001 to 2011. But by 2011, my kids had been launched off to college, and we had saved some money, and we were pretty my wife and I were pretty confident that I could retire from that and really work on serving the community. And I'd already started some of that work in 2007, 8, 9 here in Boulder. And I really enjoyed it. As a matter of fact, I was finding that work was getting in the way of what I really liked to do. And so I retired. I literally went into Jim Crow's office on my 50th birthday in 2011 and said, "Jim, today's my birthday." He said, "Happy birthday." And I said, "Well, I'm leaving." Yeah. And it was an uplifting experience, and it took a load off just from the standpoint I knew that I would be able to dedicate all of my time to community service. I know that sounds hokey. It's really what I wanted to do, and because financially I was in a secure position, I was able to do that. So the first things I did was really get involved in the nonprofit world. I didn't get into politics until a few years later. I was involved with the Colorado Chautauqua Association, which runs the Chautauqua here in Boulder, and the Dairy Arts Center, and some other nonprofits. But probably the biggest one that I worked on was what was then called the Boulder History Museum. The Boulder History Museum was founded in 1944, and as the name would imply, it preserves artifacts and documents and tells the story of Boulder's history, going back to its founding, at least its white founding in 1859. And by then I had become chair of the nonprofit board.
What was Boulder part of that?
Well, Boulder, the indigenous people were here. Ute and Arapaho tribes were here in the area. Gold was discovered in the mountains near Boulder in the late 1850s, and white settlers moved in from my hometown in Nebraska and from other places and developed a community here in Boulder. And in 1944, many of the old pioneers had died or were dying off, and a collection of community leaders came together and formed what was called the Boulder Historical Society and opened the first of what were several historical museums here in Boulder. So I got involved in that in 2009. There was an executive director of the History Museum by the name of Nancy Geyer. And Nancy was a visionary person. And we had a small museum, it was about 3,000 square feet. We took in a few hundred visitors a month, but it was just not what Boulder needed or deserved. And Nancy had a vision of creating a much, much larger museum that could put on big programs and take in big exhibits and really display a lot more of the artifacts. And I had become chairman of the board at the time. And so Nancy and I partnered up and we said, let's build a bigger museum. And we hired some people to design and conceive of what the exhibits could look like. We hired some architects. We hired a consulting company that said ideal size for Boulder for a museum is about 18,000 square feet. We were 3,000 square feet. So, and we
3,000 was the old one.
The old one, yeah, the old history museum up on University Hill. And these advisors really suggested that we be in downtown Boulder. We were up on University Hill away from downtown. They said, if you could find something that's about 18,000 square feet in downtown Boulder, that's the perfect museum. We said, okay, let's do it. And so Nancy and I went out and started looking at buildings. Some were on the market, some were not on the market. And we just weren't finding it. Either they were too expensive or they were not situated right for a museum or they weren't for sale. And one day, Stephen Tebow, a good friend of yours and mine, called us up and said, I know you guys are looking for a building, right?
Which, by the way, I'm trying to get Stephen to do this podcast with me.
I'll get him.
And he doesn't know what podcasts are. So he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. So I sent him the podcast and he started to take a look at them, learn what a podcast is. So
I talk to Stephen all the time. I'll convince him it's harmless. You're harmless. So Stephen called up one day. Stephen's a big real estate developer here. Not developer, but he owns a lot of properties in Boulder. And he said, the Masonic Lodge at the corner of Broadway and Pine, right downtown Boulder, is not technically for sale, but I bet you if you offered them the right price, you could buy it. And we thought, Masonic Lodge, like who would have thought that would be a good place for a museum? And so Stephen connected.
So what is a Masonic Lodge?
Well, the Masons, the ancient order of Masons has been around for hundreds of years, and it's a men's club. It's a men's club, and it's kind of secretive. And the Masonic Lodge in Boulder was built in 1949. That particular building was built in 1949. It's a big stone edifice. It happens to be 18,000 square feet, by the way. And it's in downtown Boulder. And when they built that building in 1949, they had about 200 active members. Well, fast forward from 1949 when they built the building to 2012, they had 6 members. And they were rattling around.
Which were all of the Republicans of Boulder.
Well, pretty much. And so we said, can we look at your building? They said, well, it's not for sale. We said, well, we get that. Could we just look at your building? They said, sure. So they took us around this building. Nancy Geyer, who was the executive director of the History Museum, and I, as the chairman of the board, we looked at this and we said, oh my God, this is perfect. High ceilings, 20-foot ceilings, very few windows because they were a secret society, which is what museums love, no windows, because we don't like daylight on our artifacts. A fabulous rooftop. I mean, everything about this we loved. We said we wanted to buy it, and they said it's not for sale. And of course, I said, well, everything's had a price. I'm sure we'll be able to find a number that you'll find acceptable. And there was a long story short, there was a lengthy negotiation. We ultimately struck a deal. We gave the Masons more beer money than they'll ever be able to consume. And we burst into flames and did about a $10 million capital campaign to not only pay for the building, but also to turn it into a museum. And the museum opened in 2019.
I think it was you who took me there before the second floor was changed, because I remember the chairs lined up against the wall, and I'm sure it was you telling me the story. I didn't even know what the Masons were, and I'm like, what is this? Because it was designed in a way that
to this day, I don't want to disrespect any Masons that are listening, but or watching this podcast. But to this day, I'm not exactly sure what Masons do, but they have really big spaces to do it in. Yes. And that's I'm going to leave it at that. And so we turned it into a museum. We opened it in 2018. We rebranded it from the Boulder History Museum to the Museum of Boulder because we really expanded the scope, because we wanted to be more than just, first the Native Americans were here, and then the Indians came. I mean, the Indians left, and the pioneers came, and then the university came. History is important and relevant, but we also recognize that Boulder is famous for so many more things than gold mining. The technology and the food, and all sorts of things.
Mork and Mindy,
all sorts of things that the Boulder is famous for. And so we incorporated all those into the exhibits that we created at the museum. The museum's open to this day and has continued to grow and thrive. And I have to say that during this period between the time I left Level 3 and the time I got involved in politics, creating that museum is probably the proudest thing that I ever did.
Yeah, and I think it's important to recognize that you were 50. You had this career worth of experience that made you extraordinarily valuable. If you wanted to keep working, you could have been paid a lot of money, working for a law firm, working for other big corporations, and you chose instead, to dedicate your life toward, at first, building something that is, cherished there in Boulder. I mean, that's a big deal. I mean, you said people just do that. People don't just do that. Some do, but most don't. Most do not. Maybe they don't want to work anymore and they go golfing, or they buy a second house, or they do this or they do that. But most of them don't do what you did. Most of them don't give their life like you have to first on nonprofit causes, and then segueing into local politics. So I think that's important for listeners to kind of appreciate.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, Dan. And I've had mentors along the way. And I think, this is kind of a convergence of humility and mortality. You and I remember when we were at Level 3 that one of our directors, one of the men that was on our board of directors, was a guy by the name of Al Yates. No relation. He's black, but he was the president of Colorado State University. He was on our board of directors. And Al had all sorts of wits and wisdoms and really smart things. One of the things that one of his wisdoms was, humility is a recognition that your life could collapse in an instant. Humility is a recognition that your life could collapse in an instant. And you need to grasp every day as if it was your last day, because tomorrow it could be your last day. Or something else could happen to you that would be really horrific and life-affecting. And so I think each of us has to kind of reflect. And of course, having a little bit of money in the bank helps you do this reflection. So I don't want to overplay that or underplay that. But I think it's important to recognize that we're here for a limited point of time, and then we shuffle off. And when I mentor young people, I always ask them to think about 2 moments in the day. Every day has these 2 moments. The first moment is early in the morning after you're getting dressed and you're putting on your socks and shoes. Most people do that every day. And during that minute,
I usually don't wear socks.
Well, in your case, it's just we'll just call it the shoes thing. But at some point in time, you're getting dressed, and that's a good moment to do some self-reflection. And you really have to ask yourself 2 questions: am I making things better, and am I happy? And if you answer both those questions yes, then that's what life's all about. But if you have a series of days when you're putting on your socks and shoes, or in your case, just the shoes without socks, and you can't answer both those questions yes, there's something wrong. You need to make an adjustment. The second moment is when you lay your head down on the pillow at night and you're about to fall off to sleep and say, let me reflect back over the last 14, 16, 18 hours. Did I do good today? Did I do something today that was of value to the community, to the world? You didn't have to, invent the polio vaccine. But if you did something good and positive that was constructive for the world, and if you didn't, you wasted that day. And remember, we only have about 25 or 30,000 days, each of us.
So if you're trying to be so thoughtful, Bob, so thoughtful in your day, from when you wake up in the morning, how you reflect at night, at what part of the day, sometime in that time frame of your life, did you say, and I think I'm going to torture myself by getting involved in the city politics of Boulder?
Well, I'm not a political person, and I'm not a politician. But running for city council, it was a way to serve the community. I was doing some nonprofit work, and can
you describe what getting involved in the city of Boulder politics?
Sure.
Paint that picture, create that scene. So what are you stepping into, whether it was then and largely unchanged to this day now? What does that mean? Like, what environment are you stepping into?
Well, just set the context. Boulder is a town of about 100,000 people, and it's what's called a home rule city here in Colorado, which means it can kind of more or less make its own rules and govern itself. The state doesn't interfere, and the county don't interfere too much. And we have what's called a weak mayor.
And the federal government's afraid of Boulder, so they don't.
They're definitely afraid of us. We're a sanctuary city. And Boulder has a weak mayor system. So I'll contrast that with Denver or Los Angeles or Chicago or New York, which have strong mayors who effectively run the city. They're empowered. I'm not saying strong personality, but they're empowered to run the city. That all the city employees work for the mayor. In Boulder, the mayor is really a figurehead. He or she is just really the chairman of the city council. So the city council makes the laws, passes the budgets, makes policy decisions, but the day-to-day operations of the city are run by a professional city manager, not the mayor and not city council. Now, the city manager is hired by city council, and he or she serves at council's pleasure, but they're a professional manager. And that's true for medium-sized and small towns. Boulder's probably on the cusp between, there may be a day when we have a strong mayor system, but we're kind of a large,
because
small town.
Boulder, I mean, we say it's 100,000 people, but Boulder isn't your average 100,000 person town. Boulder balloons up to how big during?
Oh, probably 150,000 during the day on weekdays. Yeah.
Yeah. Plus, then you have the university on top of it.
University.
And that's not part of the 100,000. So when they're up on campus, so this 100,000 people who live here, really day to day, what would you say, get closer to 200,000, as far as the activity level going on in and around Boulder.
I mean, Boulder definitely punches above its weight in a whole lot of regards. I mean, the governor lives here in Boulder. Not only is from here, he lives here in Boulder. He doesn't even live down the governor's mansion in Denver. Our attorney general's was the dean of the law school here.
Who we just recorded Phil yesterday.
Oh, good. You've recorded Phil. He's a great guy.
I don't know if it'll be released before yours or not, but we just finished his.
Phil helped us launch Level 3 back in the 90s. The Speaker of the Senate, the Speaker of the House. I mean, so many of our leaders in the state of Colorado. I only half jokingly say that Boulder is the center of Colorado. It's actually the center of the universe.
Yes.
But certainly is the de facto capital.
And by center of the universe, it's a little tongue in cheek, but it's always been said that it's the independent Republic of Boulder.
Right.
Boulder doesn't really pay attention to our Constitution, our Bill of Rights. It kind of makes up its own laws. That's obviously tongue in cheek, but it's very independent. It behaves as if it's a big city. And frankly, with stuff that happens out of Boulder, in many respects, it does categorize as a bigger city. I mean, people don't think of Boulder as a suburb of Denver. People think of Boulder as its own community, and rightfully so.
So I got involved in the city council. A good friend of mine, George Karakian, had been on city council, and our city council largely are really citizen servants. Very few people use that as a launching pad to then go on to higher political office. Most people serve 1 or 2 terms on city council. They're serving the community, and that's it. That's the beginning, middle, and end of their political lives.
Okay, I guess I'll let their city servants. I think I'll let that go for now. But I guess I'm going to be coming back to what that really means.
You'll find, Dan, that I'm a very optimistic and positive person. But we,
I know they're serving. I'm not sure if they're serving the city or serving other purposes.
Well, there's no corruption, so they're not patting themselves. Yeah, they may have their own political agendas.
Yes, that is true. It's not a corrupt city.
Of course, we all have our own political agenda. We all have our own political beliefs. And so George was retiring from city council, and he talked me into to throw my hat in the ring. And I had never run for anything before, but I threw my hat in the ring and ran for city council, and I was elected, and that was great. Boulder it doesn't have elections by wards or districts; it's all at large. And so what happens every 2 years in Boulder is somewhere between 15 and 25 people raise their hand and says, "I'd like to run for city council." It only takes 25 people to sign a petition to be a candidate. And the top 4 or 5 vote getters get elected. It's staggered, the 9-member council staggered terms. And so I was among those 4 or 5 top vote getters and got elected.
I haven't shared this with my team yet, but my team, about 10, 11 people, about half of them live in the city of Boulder. They don't know it, but they're going to be required to get 25 signatures so that they can run for city council. Maybe not this next election, but the one. So we're going to try to clean sweep the city council by young, energetic.
I love it when
employees
young people,
of cruise ranchers.
I love it when young people run for and are elected to especially a city council. One of the things that's challenging for us here in Boulder is we don't always reflect the city council doesn't always reflect the demographics. We have 9-member council that represents 100,000 people in town. And the job pays $12,000 a year, which is, if you're retired, that's fine. But for young people, that doesn't cover the rent. And one of the measures that's on the ballot this year.
12,000 is a really low number. I mean,
it's a really low number.
It doesn't cover the rent. It's kind of a little bit
for a job that takes anywhere from 30 to 50 hours a week.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really a full-time job. As a matter of fact, there's an express exception in Colorado law that says elected officials don't get minimum wage because it would come down to less than $1 an hour. So it's a challenge in Boulder because in a lot of other cities like us, where you're asking young people to work for $12,000 a year on something that really amounts to a full-time job, and it's a pretty stressful job.
Well, why do you say it amounts to a full-time job? I think you treated it, as do a few of your other city council members, certainly treat it as a full-time job. But I can't believe is there 7 or 9?
9.
I can't believe the majority of them really are spending that much time.
I think it takes a minimum of 20 hours a week. I mean, first of all, you have a city council meeting alone is 3, 4, 5 hours once a week.
Yeah, which is crazy if you think about that too.
Well, and then you get a pack of materials ahead of time to read, and it's usually 1,000 pages. That's like reading a novel every week. Then you have meetings with city staff. You got meetings with council members. You got meetings with the community. Give you an idea, and I'm not complaining about the job. But I believe in truth in advertising, and so when people come to me and say I'm thinking about running for city council, I tell them I'm not trying to talk them into it or out of it, but I want to make sure that they're very clear about what it is. City council gets 18,000 emails a year from constituents, about 50 a day. And you need to read each one of them. As a matter of fact, it's good practice to respond to those as well. And so I'm
still waiting, Mayor Brockert, if you're watching this, I'm still waiting for you to respond to the emails I sent you a couple of years ago.
I tried to respond to all the emails I got. And it does take a lot between reading those emails and responding and meeting with constituents and meeting with city staff and meeting with your council colleagues and attending the meetings and reading the materials. It takes a lot of time. I just don't think you can do it in less than 20 hours a week. And it oftentimes will take me 40, 50, 60 hours. It was easy for me because I was retired, but I do feel bad for the young people who roll up their sleeves and really want to make a contribution to the community. And it's challenging. Some people manage 2 jobs. Let me ask
this, because I'm on the outside looking in, so I don't know the answers to questions. But it strikes me that the amount of time that you have to spend, my guess is 2/3 of that is not productive time.
Well,
it's not efficient. It's not well designed. It's like you're obligated to do things a certain way for whatever set of reasons, but 9 people spending 40 hours on average a week to be part of a city council, you guys aren't doing, the output of that isn't, oh my gosh, we have just this extremely informed group of city council members because they're spending all this hour pretty much for free to make our community better. That's not the dynamic that's taking place there. It's a lot of like unproductive time.
Well, that was one of the big learnings for me, having come from
we wouldn't have built very many fiber networks.
No, that's just going to say,
if that's the way we operated.
Coming from the business world, working with you, where every moment needs to be productive in advancing the cause, governments are inherently inefficient. They have good intentions, and they're trying to serve their communities and provide government services, but there is certainly inefficiencies.
But do you think other city councils and other communities have a similar dynamic to
yes,
that?
They do. When I was on city council, I was a member of a kind of a club called the National League of Cities, and that's where all the council members and mayors of all the cities around the country get together, and we kind of compare notes, and we found out that we were equally inefficient across the country. It's a matter of fact, a lot of times we were looking for that shining city on the hill, that one efficient city government that did everything right that we could all emulate. It's challenging. And one of the reasons why it's challenging is because you have so many competing needs in a community. If I could describe the job of city council, and this is probably true for most government, but certainly at the local level, if I could describe the job in one word, it'd be prioritization. The task you're faced with is to listen to 100,000. You have 100,000 customers, 100,000 clients in the case of Boulder. They all have different needs and expectations. And then you need to take a finite set of resources, financial and human resources, and apply those and try to keep as many people happy as possible. Some people want more money spent on arts. Some people want pickleball courts. Some people want the potholes to be filled faster. Some people want stronger police. Some people want weaker police. And so you have 100,000 people clamoring for their thing, which often conflicts with their next door neighbor's thing. And as a member of city council, you then have to listen. You get to listen to those people then, but you have to make the decisions. And sometimes those decisions are tough because there are winners and losers. It's zero sum. Oftentimes, $1 spent on thing A is $1 that you can't spend on thing B, and you just disappointed the champion of thing B.
Yeah, that all makes sense. You mentioned earlier, and if I have a challenge with kind of the way Boulder is governed, it's not in any of the individuals who are part of the governance. And it's certainly with respect to the fact that the votes are legitimately being cast and people are getting the most votes are on city council, which makes sense. It's that the result of all that is a city council that doesn't seem to be a balanced representation of the community of Boulder. There's not kind of a collection of people that, as they're going through the process you described, are kind of entering the discussions with kind of a fulsome perspective across the many constituents of Boulder. It's very slanted. The result of it's very slanted. Again, not for any mischievous reasons. People who are getting the most votes tend to be of a certain category of people who've lived in Boulder and represent certain constituencies. And there's not much of a counterbalance to that on the other side. And I think in some ways that produces things we should be proud of in Boulder. In some ways it produces unnecessary kind of conflict where you don't feel like there's good representation for the entirety of Boulder. I mean, Boulder's a great place. You and I love Boulder. Most people live here love Boulder. A lot of us want to see Boulder protected. We want to see Boulder, at least people like me, want to see Boulder advance a certain direction, not be held back, which is maybe where some of the inherent conflict comes from. But it sure would be nice if whatever process that is used to elect representatives in Boulder, the result of that was a balanced group. And I think the other thing, and you touched on this earlier, the fact that you get paid so little and you have to spend so much time, and that time, at least from my perspective, is mostly very unproductive time. You just have to be willing to do it. That's going to result in people who are willing to do the job that won't be a balanced representation in the community. It's almost like if you're willing to do that, you've got such a small number of people who are willing to say, yeah, I guess I'll spend 40, 50 hours a week, most of the time sitting in meetings, hearing people ramble on and on, not really be able to make many decisions because that's sort of the mayor's job. But yeah, I'll do that. And, and it turns out to be a very
It's like
narrow
the old
set of
Groucho.
representatives.
Was it Groucho? No, W.C. Fields or Groucho Marx? No, W.C. Fields. I wouldn't join a club that would have me.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want anybody elected to serve who's willing to do the job. Right? If you're crazy enough to do the job, I actually don't want you.
Yeah.
I know what you're saying. I think there's a couple issues there. One is you don't get necessarily always the best and the brightest. I mean, you're paying $12,000 a year for a job that's somewhere between half-time and full-time. So there are people that you and I would look to and say, we really admire that person. That person would be really great on city council. And they would say to us, are you crazy? Why would I do that? The second is people do get overwhelmed with the process. Sometimes they go into with the best of intentions. They just get absolutely overwhelmed by all the things they've got to do that get in the way of achieving things. Sometimes there's not truth in advertising. Sometimes a person says, I stand for A, and they get elected and they do B. And you say, gosh, how did that person get elected? They're doing B. Well, who supports B? Sometimes people change. They think they actually genuinely say they're going to do A and they want to do A, and then they get on council and they realize that maybe B is a little bit more attractive. And so all those things happen. The good news is elections happen every 2 years. And so if you're disappointed with who you have representing you, you have the opportunity to unelect them. We also have term limits in Boulder. So no one can serve more than 3 terms. But actually, like it's really rare for anyone to even serve 3 terms. Most people self-eliminate, and someone did an analysis. They went back and looked at about 60 years of Boulder City Council, and the average term was 5.8 years. And we serve 4-year terms. So most people serve 1 term. Some people serve 2 terms. Really rare for anybody to serve more than 2 terms. Because it is a tough job and people tend to select out. So even if you don't like the council you have right now, it's like the weather, right? Wait 5 minutes, you'll get a new one.
Yeah, but that presumes that there's going to be opportunities to bring in new people that maybe think or behave in a complementary way. So not, entirely different, but certainly a broader representation. But the other structural challenges, by the way, good news is you get to run for city council. You only need 25 signatures. The bad news is it sucks to be a city council member.
Well, I wouldn't, I disagree with that because I don't think it sucked. I mean, I served on city council
shorthand for you don't get paid much money.
Yeah.
You work a whole bunch of hours, and most of that's just time that I would view as like unproductive time.
I was elected in 2015. I served 4 years. I liked it so much I went back for more.
Yeah.
I served another 4 years, and I liked that so much that I went back and tried to do it one more time. And I wasn't elected the last time, but I did 8 going on 12. And so it was
you are a special human being.
Well, The best part of it, I would say, is actually, believe it or not, is city staff. It's a very competent city staff. They make mistakes along the ways, and there's things that frustrate people, there's no doubt. And we do have these competing needs in the community, so you're not going to be able to make everybody happy. But the city staff, over and over again, makes city council look pretty good. And they do all the heavy lifting, they do all the work. And that's why I really enjoyed the job, is to work around some really, really smart people who really knew their areas, whether it was transportation or housing or arts or public safety. And they did their jobs, and they did their jobs well, and they made us look good. We were really simply the policy deciders. We were just the people that sat there and say, well, can we do a little bit more of this and a little bit less of that? But the really hard work was done by the city staff, and I'm always grateful to them for what they do.
Yep. And what do you think that Boulder at some point should have a stronger kind of?
Well, I think we're heading that direction. Up until just last year and up until 2023, Boulder's mayor, which is what's called a weak mayor, doesn't mean the person's weak, but the mayor has no more authority than their peers on city council, was just one of 9 members of city council. And they were selected not by the voters, but by their peers on city council. So you have a 9-member city council, and once every 2 years, they'd sit around a table and say, all right, who wants to be mayor? And they would elect one of them among them to be the mayor, and all the mayor would do was facilitate the meeting. That's the only power the mayor would have, facilitate the meeting. And of course, they're the figurehead for the city, but at the end of the day, they had no more power. They didn't have veto power. They didn't get to boss anybody around. They were one of 9. In 2020, the voters decided they wanted something a little bit different. They wanted to directly elect their mayor. Now, they didn't give the mayor any more power, but they said, rather than having council pick the mayor, we, the voters, want to pick the mayor. And so that would
the way you characterize that is as if all the voters got together and decided that, and they did technically because they had to vote that in.
Right.
But certainly they didn't get together and say, hey, fellow voters, do you think we should change the system a little bit? What was the dynamic that led to that being an option on the election ballot?
Yeah, there was a group of people who. So there's 2 ways that a measure can be put on the ballot in Boulder. One is city council can put it on. Just 5 out of 9 people can choose to do that, and the voters get to decide whatever the proposition is. The second way is if a group of people in town circulate a petition, and they get a certain number of signatures. It's about 3,000 or 4,000 signatures in this town of 100,000 people. That can be certified and be put on the ballot, and the voters get to vote yes or no on whatever the proposition was. So in 2020, a group of people here in town, a small group of people, said, we think there should be direct election of mayor. They went out and they collected the 3,000 or 4,000 signatures. And by the way, this is during COVID, so good on them. It went to the voters that November in 2020, and the voters voted.
What was the vote?
In favor. It wasn't close. I don't remember the precise numbers, but it was well over 55 or 60%.
Okay,
said that we wanted direct election.
And so what would the process be to convert from being, and help me with the right wording, the weak mayor system to the strong mayor system?
Sure. So we're in that hybrid situation right now where we have the old system. We're still with the weak mayor, still with no more authority. Now the people get to elect the mayor. So the next step would be a further change to what's called the city charter, which is our local constitution, which would allow the mayor to really have administrative authorities the way you see in larger cities like Denver, Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, and so on and so forth. It would take another vote of the people. And again, that decision, that charter amendment, could be put on the ballot either by a group of people collecting a few thousand signatures or by the city council itself.
So it's the same process.
Exactly the same process.
So Mayor Johnson was a guest on the podcast.
I saw that.
First guest.
It was a great
and it was filmed within his office. And I left that conversation inspired by and more confident in our political leadership and his mindset, his energy, his orientation toward getting stuff done, and willing to tackle the hard issues and willing to tackle them in a way that that he's probably going to fall short of things that he's trying to get done, and willing to say, hey, if we fall short, we fall short, but we're going to think bold and we're going to pursue big changes. And just loved hearing that. And then I contrast that to Boulder and say, is there an opportunity for there to be that type of leader that emerges in Boulder? And I don't think under the current system that's possible. I mean, even if you've got a competent city mayor, they're accountable to a city council that, again, from my point of view, the city council's weight slanted toward, not wanting to see much disruption, not wanting to see much change, not taking as seriously some of the things that I think should be at the very top of our list, like the safety and security of the citizens of Boulder should be at the very top of the list. And that's not where their orientation is.
Well, it's frustrating too. I don't disagree with you, and I envy Mike Johnson and strong mayor systems, and it's frustrating in two regards. It's frustrating from the community standpoint because they elect city council and now they elect the mayor, and they expect that person to be a leader and to do what the majority of the community wants and to take the city in new directions. But the city council has very little authority, very little power, and the mayor certainly doesn't have any. And so they're frustrated because the honest answer to a question, can you fix my potholes, or can you build more pickleball courts, or can you have enhanced public safety, is only the city manager can do that. Well, I didn't vote for her. Who decides, who tells her what to do? And the answer is she decides what she wants to do. And the city council has very limited authority to that. So it's frustrating from a community standpoint. But it's also frustrating from a council standpoint because we're effectively powerless. And so we get a lot of the angst and frustration of the community without the authority to make that change. And so I do hope that someday Boulder does move to a strong mayor system, and I think it'll eventually happen.
Yeah, I'll challenge you on that.
Okay, go ahead.
Because use the word leader and leadership.
Yeah,
the leaders matter.
They do.
And sometimes when you're a leader, it's not because you have all the power and therefore you're just exerting the power as leader. It's that you're being a leader and you're influencing the outcome in an outsized way. And the mayor and the city council can certainly choose to be much more impactful in their aspiration. And if they do it the right way, they should have heavy influence over the city manager. Like you said, who decides who the city manager is? It's city council. But even just by using their pulpit, that alone could be influential outcome. I mean, a very strong message as an example, like, hey, we want to give full support to our law enforcement.
Yep.
If we got some bad apples in there, we'll take care of that. But we want to work and partner with our law enforcement and make sure that we prioritize safety and security as high as possible. Now, can the city manager say, thanks for your opinion, mayor, thanks for your opinion, city council, we're going to do something completely different? I don't know. Maybe they can, but the leadership of the city council can say, well, that might be an option in the short term, but that's not an option in the medium term. We're going to confront that issue. And, I'm not saying the city manager would do that. This isn't a reflection on what her mindset would be. I think she's, from what I heard, I don't know her, but, I'm not, I think she's respected within the city. I'm not implying otherwise, but I don't think that dynamic happens. I think it could happen now. As it sounds like you said, if they wanted to change and make a strong mayor system, it sounds like the city council, 5 of them could get together and put that on the ballot.
Absolutely.
And advocate for that, so they could even drive that change if they wanted to.
They could. Ultimately, the voters would have to decide that, but they could put that on the ballot. And so I don't disagree with what you said, Dan. I don't want to overplay the weak mayor system.
Yeah, the helplessness.
And that's one of the reasons I ran for mayor myself in 2023, the first mayoral election in Boulder.
It came really close.
Yeah, I did come close. Because leadership does matter. You're absolutely right. Leadership does matter. And there is a distinction between leadership and authority. There's people who lead, even if they don't have the legal power and authority to do things, they're still leaders of the community. And I think, I'm not going to identify any one person, but I do think that sometimes Boulder has in the past lacked leadership. You forget about the legal part of it, think about the authority part of it. I think that sometimes we have lacked leadership. We've also had some really, really great leaders as well. And so I raised my hand and said, hey, listen, I got some experience here. I'd like to have an opportunity to be a leader. The voters decided a different direction. So I'm now off of council and doing other things. And I think.
And you're not off of council because you lost the city council election.
No.
It's that you had to elect the.
Yeah, the way it worked is I had a choice of I could have run for a third term on council or I could run for mayor, but they were mutually exclusive. And so I had to make a tough decision about which to do. So I raised my hand and said, listen, I'd like to serve as Boulder's first directly elected mayor. And as you say, it was close, but didn't quite get there.
In the first, so we use a different voting system here in Boulder than most of the country uses. And there's movements to shift more toward the system we went to, which is called ranked choice. Is that the right word for it? Yeah. So tell people what ranked choice is and how it played out in Boulder, which I'm a supporter of ranked choice. Mm-hmm. Despite, in this case, the outcome being a little, the opposite of what I was hoping for. So
I was in favor of it. I was in favor, and am in favor of ranked choice voting myself. The way that if you have two candidates, obviously running for a particular office, one by definition is going to have more votes than the other, unless it's an exact tie.
And by definition, if there's only two, one's going to have more than 50% as well.
More than 50%, yeah, exactly. But when you have 3 or 4 or 5 multiple candidates, it's entirely possible that the winner is the person who has a plurality of the votes, but not a majority of the votes, right? They may have 40
plurality. Yeah, plurality means less than 50%, but more than anybody else.
And so when Boulder put the ranked choice voting in place in 2020 to be implemented in 2023, they did 2 things. Number one, the voters get to decide who the mayor is. And secondly, that mayor would be selected by ranked choice voting. So if there was more than 2 candidates, and I'll walk through the system. So in the case of 2023, our first mayoral election here in Boulder, there were 4 candidates, 4 people ran. And if one of us had gotten 51% on the first count, that would have been it. The ranked choice voting would have been irrelevant. Yeah. But none of us did. None of us did. And so in ranked choice voting, the way it works is the person, obviously there was a first, second, and third, and a fourth place. The person who came in 4th place is then eliminated. Now, when the voters fill out their ballots.
Well, before you eliminated anyone, who had the most votes the first?
I had the most votes, first place votes. And
what percentage was it?
Oh, I think it was in the mid 40s. I don't remember the precise number.
Really?
I thought you was close.
I thought you would have known the exact down to 1 or 2 decimal points.
It's a painful memory, so I didn't memorize it.
I thought it was more like 46, 47.
It was something in the 40s. And when the voters fill out their ballots, they have an opportunity. They're not required to. They have an opportunity to not only pick their first choice, but they can also pick their second choice and their third choice if they want to. And so the way the ranked choice voting works when no one gets 51%, I didn't, is the person who comes in last in 4th place is eliminated, and the computer automatically looks at how that person's ballots were filled out, and that person is out of the race. But their second, however their voters voted for second place, those ballots are reallocated up the stack among the main 3 people. Then you see, all right, now we got 3 people. Did anyone come above 51%?
So despite your denial of not knowing where you came out the first time, now when they've redistributed the 4th place votes, what percentage were you?
Not much different, because that guy didn't get very many votes, so it didn't really matter.
So the 4th place candidate was not.
I think I got a lot of his votes.
They were not choosing you.
I think I got a lot of his votes, but he didn't get that many votes, so it didn't really matter. So then you go to the 3rd place runner, and you eliminate that person, and then you reallocate. In this case, it was a woman. You reallocate her votes. Who are her voters picked for the second place.
Now by this point, by definition, since now there's only 2 remaining voters,
somebody's going to win.
Someone's got to have more than 50%, or either that or it's a dead heat tie of 50-50.
Exactly. And she was probably more politically aligned with the person who was ultimately elected, and so a vast majority of her votes were reallocated to him rather than to me. And so when the dust settled, I was a little bit below 50%. He was a little bit above 50%. Yeah. So he's elected mayor. And he's a great guy. Aaron Brock is a great guy. He was already the incumbent mayor. He was the last appointed mayor in Boulder, and now he is the first publicly elected mayor in Boulder. He's a good guy, and he and I were elected to council together in 2015. So we've been side by side for 8 years, and I honestly feel Boulder's in good hands.
Okay, well, yeah, I think I don't know Aaron as well as you know Aaron. I have no reason to think differently than him. Seeing him as a good guy, he strikes me as a really nice person.
He is
a really a gentle person. I haven't seen leadership come from Aaron, and frankly, again, I don't have an agenda. It's not like I got all these things that I want Boulder to do or not do. I just don't think the overall leadership of City Council, represents the broader community and aspects of community that I think deserve, equal attention. So it's not really a reflection on the individual or the collection of individuals, but I certainly would love to see more leadership out of the City Council. I get the fact that it isn't. So you're probably over 49% once the last go around, or just under?
I don't
somewhere
remember.
In the high 40s.
It was pretty close.
Yeah, it was in a tight range, but I think, what was interesting to me is, as a supporter of ranked choice, but never having experienced it, even after the outcome of ranked choice meant the person I was supporting, you, came in a little bit short, I still believe in ranked choice, because at the end of the day, what happened was more than 50% of those who voted in Boulder favored, him, and less than 50% favored you, versus the distortions that could take place if you let a broad group of candidates run, because blocks of voters who have similar points of view split their votes, and someone ends up winning not because the majority of Boulder supported that person. It just was kind of a math challenge.
Yeah, the philosophy is you want the community to be led by a person who has at least 51% of the support of either in their first choice or their second choice, or sometimes even their third choice of that person, rather than a mere plurality, which could be in the 30s or 40s.
Yeah.
Right. And
so
if
a whole bunch of people ran, it could be in the 20s.
It could be in the 20s. And, that's on the ballot here in Colorado to elevate that on some of the statewide. As we tape this podcast, we don't know what the outcome is going to be. So we'll see how that shakes out. But there is a movement towards ranked choice voting across the country. Several states have moved to that. Several cities have moved to that. And I think it will be the way that many elections will be conducted. It worked. Even though I lost, it worked exactly the way it was supposed to work.
Yes.
I know it was a little confusing for people. And to this day, I still get people who were kind of scratching their head going like, what was I supposed to do there?
Yeah. None of that. People are still like, oh, the election was stolen because
it wasn't stolen.
Crazy thing called ranked choice. And
it wasn't stolen.
They just don't understand what ranked choice is all about. I still get that about like, oh, that ranked choice, like it was some kind of manipulation, but I've been supportive.
We all knew the system going into it. We knew how it worked. It worked exactly the way it was supposed to work.
I agree.
And it will work the way it's supposed to. And after a couple, 2-3 cycles, people will get used to it and they'll understand how it works.
So are you done now? Am
I done? I'm not dead yet.
Are you done with city council? Are you done with running for mayor? Or
I'm done with the political part of my life. I looked at it as the 8 years I served in council as a way of serving the community in a different way than I had in the nonprofit world. I've moved back to the nonprofit world, and I'm doing a number of things. One of the things I'm particularly excited about is the Center for Leadership at the University of Colorado, which is really not a nonprofit. It's really part of the university. This was started by former Chancellor Phil DeStefano a few years ago as a way to inculcate students with leadership opportunities. There's two philosophies. Some people believe that leaders are born, and others that leaders are made. And I believe in that second approach, that anyone can be taught leadership. And we want to give as many students, and as the 38,000 students we have on campus, opportunities for leadership. Sometimes it's ROTC, sometimes it's athletics, sometimes it's leadership at the lead school or through a mentorship program. But there are opportunities to take these 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old students and introduce them to opportunities that they hadn't realized. The leader that's inside of each one of them. And so the Center for Leadership is an organization that helps all of these organizations on campus that are trying to teach leadership in certain ways. We're developing a leadership minor, so students can major in chemistry or philosophy or business or whatever, but minor in leadership, because leadership is something you need no matter what your career or profession in life is.
And who leads up Leadership Academy?
Phil DeStefano. Phil recently,
as chancellor, but what about
no. Phil just retired as chancellor, and he became the senior director for the Center for Leadership.
Okay.
Yes, and so we're still blessed with Phil, and I serve on that board, and we have a mentorship program which I'm quite involved in, and we bring community leaders in town, people who already have leadership experience in town, people that are in their 30s, 40s, 50s. I'm fishing
for another answer when I say who leads it.
What answer are you looking for?
Who leads it on more of a full-time basis?
Stephanie Johnson.
Yeah, so Stephanie Johnson was sitting in that very chair.
Oh, she was. Okay,
about
good.
a week ago.
Yeah. Stephanie, we brought in Stephanie from Rice about a little over a year ago to be the day-to-day executive director.
Yes.
Phil is our senior or emeritus director. And between Stephanie and Phil, we have some great leadership at the Center for Leadership. We have a wonderful board of outstanding people. And our goal is to really give students on campus an opportunity to learn to become leaders, to teach them to become leaders in the community. I'm serving on the board of Boulder Community Hospital. I'm involved with the chamber in downtown. So, that's the nice thing about Boulder. There's no lack of opportunities to get involved and stay involved and help the community become better.
Yep. And I know you asked me to be a mentor to some of the students. As you, I think, know, I'm very supportive of leaning in and helping kind of different groups at the university, both with time and with financial support. And certainly we'll do that with Leadership Center. One-on-one mentoring typically isn't the best way for me to leverage my time doing things like having you here and Stephanie here. But our team at Crucible Ventures, one of our philosophies and cultural principles is that each of our employees is not just encouraged, but expected to spend about 20% of their time supporting kind of the the community, the nonprofits that are part of our mission. And so I think you'll see a lot of one-on-one mentoring, or at least offers to mentor from our broader team directed toward the Leadership Center. So we will definitely be supportive. And I definitely will look for opportunities or be open-minded to opportunities if there's ways to help in a more,
Well, that's great. And I should probably, as we wind down here, one final thing I do want to mention is my newsletter.
Yes,
and I'm going to write about leadership in an upcoming issue of my newsletter. So when I first got elected to council in 2015, I was kind of scratching my head wondering, like, how do I communicate with constituents? How do I let them know what I'm doing and what's going on with the city? And, our local press is maybe not as strong as it could be. And so I just decided to make my own publication. And so I launched a newsletter in 2016 called the Boulder Bulletin. And I had no idea if it was going to be successful or not, but it was just a way for me to communicate with people and also solicit communication from constituents. What am I doing right? What do I need to do differently? And it started with a couple hundred subscribers. And over the course of years, it's grown to almost 8,000 subscribers, 8,000 households in Boulder subscribe. And when I left City Council last year, I thought, well, okay, this was really a tool for the time I was on City Council, and so I can stop it now. I don't have to keep doing this because it's a lot of work. It comes out once a month.
Yeah.
And I put out 96 issues over the course of 8 years, and I thought, well, okay, I'm done with that. And a lot of readers said, no, it's a valuable way for me to keep plugged into the community, because I write not only about city government, but also what's going on in our community from a nonprofit standpoint, good deeds that people are doing, and profiling people in the community. And so I've continued it. Even though I've been off council for a year, I've continued the newsletter. I really enjoy it. I wanted to be a journalist. I was in college, and I was the editor of my college newspaper. Then I realized it didn't pay very well, and so I became a lawyer.
You think it paid poorly then? How about now?
Yeah, it's even worse now. But back in the 1980s, it wasn't very good either. So I became a lawyer, which paid a little bit better. But I had a frustrated journalist in me. So for me, it's an opportunity for me to write things, which I enjoy writing, but also an opportunity, more importantly, for me to help the community stay plugged in with what the city government's doing and what other things are going on in our community. And anybody who's watching this wants to subscribe, they can just send me an email, bobyatesboulder@gmail.com.
So Bob Yates
Boulder.
So all
Bob Yates
Boulder, one word,
at gmail.com. Just write me in. I can get you subscribed.
Yeah, maybe we could flash that on.
Sure, absolutely.
We'll flash on the screen. How about that?
Yeah, and I love the feedback I get from people when this comes out once a month. It's always the first Monday of the month, and it really is an opportunity for me to help people understand what's going on in our community. I consider myself the lowest common denominator. If I can understand something and explain it to somebody else.
Oh, you're being humble now.
No.
You might be able to fool listeners. You can't fool me. This is one smart dude.
We all have a teacher embedded in us. And for me, it's an opportunity to teach people what's going on, to learn what's going on, and then to pass that learning.
Have you thought about using AI to kind of amplify your ability
I have.
to share information?
I'm a little intimidated by it. I mean, I understand how technology works. I'm a little intimidated that I'm going to lose the what I call the voice.
Oh, yeah. It's not a substitute, but it certainly is a potential for local news. It's a potential, because if AI kind of sifts through how long are those city council meetings? Like
hours and hours and hours.
Yeah, and you could it could do the listening of that for you if you work it out with them, and allow you to use the feed, and then it could summarize that into something, and then you're reading and editing from there, not doing anything else. And if you think about all the different pockets of where there is information that, if summarized well and disseminated, we'd have a much more informed community. Police blogs, fire, some of the nonprofit, the police foundation. that my wife Cindy played a big role in. Things like that can easily turn into journalistic articles. Again, if you just take the AI, it's not going to be very interesting, but it certainly would shorten the process of taking something and making it into a more quality piece. So anyways,
as a guy who worked in technology alongside you, Dan, for many, many years, I'm a bit of a Luddite. So it's going to take a little bit of effort for me to move into the AI world, but I intellectually understand that's something I need.
Well, it didn't take you effort to what are those called where you have like a character that represents you?
Oh, an avatar, yeah.
Yeah, it didn't take you long to have your own avatar, which is an awesome avatar, by the way, which I need an avatar. So anyways, thank you so much for spending all this time. And more importantly, for what you've done and are doing for Boulder. That's a big deal. And it was also fun that our journeys kind of intersect each other and
they keep doing it.
Yeah, so that's awesome as well.
Thank you for listening to part 1 of this episode of The Bear Roars featuring Bob Yates. This podcast was produced by Loud Bear Productions and edited by Kendall Weinberg with support from Courtney Caruso, Allie Berman, Emily Reed, and Gibson Seeger.